Hello, Dr. Sandner, welcome. Thank you so much for being here to talk to us about you have many books, right? But this, today we are primarily going to focus on his Unburned Heart, but we'll also tie together your more recent books too. So to start with, can you introduce yourself to the audience, tell us a little bit about your field of research interests?
Hi, I'm David Sandner from the English department. I teach Romanticism, popular literature, and creative writing. So the popular literature includes science fiction, fantasy, and horror, something I call the fantastic. So to me, they're all kind of related. So is the Romanticism, and the creative writing comes out of those spaces. So these things are all closely related to me.
And his Unburned Heart in particular. Tell us a little bit about this. It's made up of two shorter pieces. Could you give us a brief synopsis of each of the pieces?
Probably not.
No.
The main story is about, has Mary Shelley as the main character. And it's about a real life incident that supposedly, according to everybody who was there, so the historical record maintains that when they burned Percy Shelley's body on the shore, and they had to burn it for reasons of contagion with the Italian authorities. He died by drowning off the coast of Italy. That his heart did not burn. I have no idea what that actually means, but that's what everybody says. And it ended up with Mary Shelley, and that's true. And it was not originally given to her. So Leigh Hunt, who was their publisher, plays a role here in that he claims it first. The history does not record how it gets from Hunt to Shelley. So I tell a rather crazy story in that open space. So within a real historical event that are kind of crazy, I tell a story that is itself a little crazy, but potentially true to life. It says some things about Mary Shelley and the time and Unburned Heart. The second piece is called Journal of Sorrow, which was the name of Mary Shelley's real life journal when she began writing it again after she stopped when her husband died. So it's a very sad title, and it's her, that's the one I can't explain. It's her thinking about how he might have died and the many ways that it might have gone down and what it means about their relationship and her and life and his politics and all kinds of things that are on her mind, but grief. And so she's running through it in her mind in many ways. That's really what the second piece is about.
You're what I consider one of the rare academics where you're doing kind of like the strictly academic scholarship, and then you're also doing fiction. Why? How do you make the decision of which mode to write in, and in particular, why fiction to understand this episode of Percy Shelley's death and the impact on Mary Shelley?
Yeah, well, there's pieces missing, I guess, is one.
Yeah.
And so it's a way to engage, just like a historical novel, to engage with history and our insertion in history without knowing. And history is always invented anyway. I don't know. I think everybody should go about it this way, which is, I suppose, what anyone would say about their life. So to me, the creative and the academic are actually closely related. The publishing industries in both are very different. And so other parts of it and the ways it's institutionalized are different, but not in my mind in any kind of strict way. So when I'm thinking about writing a story, that academic side of making a lot of notes and getting a lot of information and organizing it is there. And I've certainly gotten in trouble on the academic side for being too flowery in the writing when you're supposed to get to the point that I'm like, I want to interest people along the way. It's like, no, I'm like, yes, So to me, the two are closely related for good or for bad sometimes in the ways I go about things.
So you're making decisions about where to fill in some gaps, and you're also having to make decisions about what voice to use. Can you describe how you both made that decision and what voice did you choose?
Yeah, you put your finger on a really tough part about writing this. I couldn't write it for a long time because I was overwhelmed to be trying to write in Mary Shelley's voice, and it seemed very much like it needed to be in her voice. It was a problem anyway, just in creative writing, in that she was very overheated at the moment that that's happening. She's so overcome by grief. Can she even tell the story? So picking the right place to even begin, but then trying to speak in her voice, it's not going to be exactly her, it's going to be a historical novel, so I needed it to sound to a modern audience like it might be in the past, but nobody wants to actually read somebody doing an 18th, early 19th century kind of voice. So it's an imaginary space and an imagination about Mary Shelley and what, I obviously think a lot about her and think she's amazing, and think a lot of people have not got her quite right. So I was motivated in a certain way to talk about her, but it took a long time until suddenly, so that part was very mystical. Waiting for the voice to click in, and before that I would write stuff and it would just be junk. I'd have to get rid of it until suddenly she began to speak, and now I'm able to write other things with her, and it's there. So it was a very strange process, one of those parts that's not technical, it's emotional.
And do you, just to pull on one of those strands, do you think that now that you wrote in her voice, and is this the first work of fiction where you have written in her voice, where you've tried to really get into her psyche?
That's been published.
That's been published, okay. So now that you've gone through this process, almost this mystical process as you describe it, where you feel like you have kind of embodied her emotional reactions, do you think it will change your academic work, or do you think that deepens your understanding of her at all?
I don't know is the real answer. Yes, I think it's about grappling with her. A lot of people have said a lot of things about her from her own time and from her mother, Mary Wollstonecraft, who was an outspoken feminist at a moment when that was not possible, and so she was attacked, and so Mary Shelley saw that, and then things were said about her, and different generations have boxed her in many ways, and I did not want to, and thought a lot of her and the way she tried to maneuver around those things. So I think it has helped me sort of think about who that person is, who was not quite as bold as Mary Wollstonecraft and yet achieved so much. And I think that's part of what I admire. I do not feel like I want to be first in line. Mary Wollstonecraft went to the French Revolution, and I admire that a great deal, and it is not me. I would have been reading the newspapers back in England and reading about it. And I think Mary Shelley was much more like that, old as she was. And so there was sort of a connection I could make about what did she achieve and how did she do this, and to think about it.
So the previous year you wrote this other book. Do you want to briefly, and I'll kind of use it for my next question about themes. Will you tell the audience about this book?
The Afterlife of Frankenstein came out in November of last year, and is a collection of short stories after the first 100 years of Frankenstein's existence. A lot of people have done collections which are heavy with the movie influence of 1931, the James Whale movie, which is amazing. But I was like, no, Mary Shelley's book, it was influential right away, and I thought I could prove it. And so there was sort of a space there to do the work and to bring out these authors. And so it looks at many of the themes we've taken away from Frankenstein and attaches them to works that I think are then in conversation with Frankenstein from 1818 to 1918. So just taking the first 100 years. And so an opening essay for me, trying to explain a lot of those themes and the ways people have read and misread Frankenstein and what that's meant for our culture. And so it has automatons and mad scientists and monsters and all kinds of fun, crazy things in it. Highly recommend it. If you want to read a lot of crazy Frankenstein-type stories.
So about a year ago, you explored all these themes that you feel have lived on beyond Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, and then you kind of finish off this work of fiction. What are the themes that you're able to explore in this work of fiction?
In his Unburned Heart, it really is.
Gender's the one I see.
Yeah.
So let's talk about gender. Yeah.
Gender is a tough one because not identified in the same gender as Mary Shelley, and that's a very clear thing I needed to think or deal with. But I was very mindful of that issue, both in her reputation and the way she presented herself and what she was doing, and why she's writing a book all about men, where the women in Frankenstein they're pawns, and yet she's the daughter of outstanding feminist. So she's not doing that by chance. She's well aware of what she's doing to the female characters in her own story, and yet writing the story embodying men. And so I'm sort of reversing that and thinking about her and what she's trying to do, what she wanted to say about toxic masculinity in Victor Frankenstein and the creature, and Walton to a certain extent. And so the men matter a lot in his Unburned Heart. The cover, great cover, has the three hands come in. Those are three men who are all in her way if she wants to get that heart back and if she feels it belongs to her. It's Leigh Hunt, the publisher, and Lord Byron, who is toxic masculinity writ large, and Trelawney, who is sort of a hanger-on, a very masculine, manly man trying to out Byron, but is Mary Shelley's friend. And so it's these people who are all, in certain ways, her friends, and in certain ways, a real pain to have to deal with, and sort of thinking about those relationships as she makes her way through her grief to get what she thinks belongs to her.
Yeah, I thought you did that really expertly, showing her navigating, because she wasn't even supposed to go to the ceremony, right? And so, there's a scene of her figuring out, does she have the right to be there? How should she get there? And so I found that to be a very powerful part of the book. So last question, what are you thinking about now? What are you working on now?
We have a novel coming out right now. So this is Egyptian Motherlode, totally different. But on December 6th, I'll have a book launch event. So I've just gotten this book into my hands. I'm at Half Off Books in downtown Fullerton, so at 4 o'clock. So you're welcome to come and I'll read from it. This is about, you can see I have a co-writer and Jacob Weisman, and so an old friend of mine, and it's set in San Francisco where we grew up, and it's about music and musicians who change time and space by the music that they play, if they play in a certain way. It's really about all the people that are affected by them. So it's a very strange book about this sort of magic moving through the world and what everybody does with it, what they think of it. So this book is just coming out. I'm working on a novel that his Unburned Heart is taken from. It was supposed to be part of a larger novel. It outgrew it and became this novella because the story of his Unburned Heart was too interesting. But that book is in process, and it's called The Frankenstein Singularity. It tells a much larger, stranger story about Mary Shelley and the past and our relationship to Frankenstein and why it's so germane to our world today.
Thank you very much for sharing your work, and congratulations. As a thank you, here's a box that looks like your book, a book box. Yes, the heart. Yeah, that's true, actually. That you don't have to go sneak in and steal from someone. Yeah. So let's all give David a round of applause. We are now going to take a couple of minutes to transition to our author panels. So come back here in a couple of minutes and we will start our next series.